If the devil is 6 and God is 7, then who is 5? Is it James Franco? James Franco? Are you 5? Wait, who's 8 then? Who the fuck is 8? Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Ghoulish. My name is Max Booth and I am a host. And today, this day of all days, you are listening to a brand new episode of a podcast called Ghoulish, hosted by me, Max Booth. This is a podcast where I, Max Booth, a host, I speak to someone in the whole genre, and we pick one topic, something spooky, hopefully, and we have a conversation about it. You might have heard of this invention on a previous podcast and talk shows and magazines. Some folks call them an interview, and yeah, I guess that's kind of what this is. A spooky interview. Today on the podcast, I have Joshua Chaplinsky, who wrote a little short story called Satanic Panic Attack, which is one of the coolest titles I've ever heard in my life. I was lucky enough to publish this story in the newest issue of Dark Moon Digest, issue 38. That's 38. Dark Moon Digest. 38. 38. You can get that issue by going to perpetualpublishing.com. It should be on the home page. You can pick up that issue by itself, or you can get an annual subscription to the magazine. At $50, you get 5 magazines throughout the year of spectacular fiction, baby. You know you want it. You know you want it. Yeah. Go get that fiction. Go get that spooky fiction. But until then, listen to this conversation, this interview, this discussion, this Q&A with Joshua Chaplinsky on Ghoulish with me, Max Booth, a host. Oh, fuck. Hey Josh, you wanna talk about the Satanic Panic movement with me?
Yes, Max. Yes, I do.
Oh, thank God. What if you said no? That would have been a long podcast. So I have you on today because you wrote something called Satanic Panic Movement. No, you didn't. Fuck. You wrote something called Satanic Panic Attack, and I am publishing it in my magazine, Dark Moon Digest. So I thought, why not promote this magazine and also find an excuse to get you on the podcast?
Yes, it's a great idea.
I think so. Thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. What came first, the plot of this story or just the title?
I believe the title probably came last. What came first was the structure or the conceit. And it's an interesting story. I don't know if you want me to say the name of the publisher on air, but I wrote this for an open call um, for a an anthology by a new publisher uh, that had actually accepted a story of yours for this anthology, and a couple other people, like I know Rob Thomas.
Oh
Not
yeah.
Wait,
What
Rob
was the
Thomas
name?
is the singer of
Yeah.
Matchbox 20. Richard Thomas,
Yes.
not Rob Thomas.
I know who you mean.
Um,
Who was that? Go ahead and name him. I don't give a shit.
or Bannon Press, I believe.
Yeah, did they die? What happened?
I think they disappeared. I saw there was a thread on Facebook that Richard Thomas had started asking people about them, saying they'd accepted his story, they had paid him, and I believe you said they had paid you,
Mm-hmm.
and then they just disappeared, and no one ever heard from them again. And so basically, he was asking people. He was like, is it okay? I'm just at this point gonna tell them, look, I'm withdrawing my story, even though you paid me, and gonna submit it somewhere else because I haven't heard from you in like 6 months." And so yeah, so if you
Okay.
did you ever hear anything further from them? Like,
No.
give us back our money, you jerk.
I emailed them a few times and nothing. It was odd because they were so communicative in the beginning. They accepted it within one day, paid me that same day, and announced it the day after.
Yeah, and it seemed like a cool project, and it had excited me enough to write something for it. Um, and it was what was the the call itself was for uh I forget specifically what the call was. I've
It begins with an E, like, and stories told through, like, letters and emails.
Yes, I'm blanking on the word.
I know it begins with an E, but I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it.
Anyway,
EP something? I don't know.
yeah, epistolatory, that's it.
Yeah, you got it.
There it is. Anyway, so that appealed to me because I like writing stories in non-traditional formats because I get bored with regular old stories easily. And so I wanted to come up with um, something different enough that would stand out and get me an acceptance because, I'm sure there were gonna be a lot of stories that were written in the form of letters or, I don't know, interviews and stuff like that. So I forget exactly how I came up with it, but I settled on the idea of writing a story in the form of one of those old text-based video games.
A brilliant idea, too. It really, like, adds something special to the story, I think.
Yeah, and it was actually a great excuse. I had never written a story in second person, and it was a perfect excuse to write in the second person because all those games were written in the second person.
Did you grow up playing those much?
I did not. I actually knew very little about them before I wrote the story. My wife had played a bunch and was familiar.
What type of research went into it then?
Well, I just started researching text-based games, and the one I kind of based mine on was one of the first. It was called Zork, which was kind of like a D&D dungeon crawler. And, you basically were like, you you're walking on a wooded path, and a road diverges between two woods. Which one do you take? That sort of thing.
Which one do you take?
Um, the road less traveled, I suppose.
Wow, I led you into that, and
Yeah,
you hit it.
I went right there. I know my well-known literary references.
Yeah, name three more.
Three, yeah, three more poems. Good luck.
So, I mean, the whole plot of this specific story is Satanic Panic Attack. It takes place in the 80s, I believe, and it's about a kid who gets recruited by the cool kids at a Dungeons and Dragons game at a comic shop.
Yeah, that's so after the I kind of came up with the conceit of the text-based game. It was also then like the story itself was kind of inspired by, I don't know if you're familiar with chick tracts.
No, please
Oh,
explain.
oh man, this is something you're gonna love. I grew up in a fairly religious household, and there were these things, big in the 80s, 90s, still through today. They're like sold millions and millions of copies called chick tracts, which were basically these religious tracts by this guy named Jack Chick, and they were like mini comic books basically, but they were all these different themes and categories, and each one had their own story. But the ones I liked the best were they had all these tracks about how like Halloween was evil, Dungeons and Dragons is evil. If your kid plays Dungeons and Dragons, they're gonna be possessed by Satan. They're gonna kill themselves. Heavy metal music is evil, and like, so
I
it was
think
just.
I gotta stop you because I'm pretty stupid. When you say tracks, what do you mean? Because I think of audio tracks.
Oh no no, tract like TRACT, like a religious tract.
I don't know what that is.
It's a leaflet you hand out, like
Okay,
when
okay.
people are proselytizing for their god.
I didn't know it was called that. Excuse me.
Well, we in the religious biz, that's what we call them, tracts. Anyway, but they were basically little mini flip through comic books, and the art was great. He was a fantastic artist and had all different styles. And, because they were Christian, I was allowed to read them, but the subject matter was pretty scandalous. There was lots of sex and violence and Satanism in them. And, if anything, it didn't scare me away from those things. It made me more interested in them.
Yeah, back in my day, we called those Tijuana Bibles.
Oh, yeah, yes, something like that. So there was one specifically that this story was inspired by, called, what was it called? It was called Dark Dungeons, about a girl who's in the play has a Dungeons and Dragons group, but it's like really a recruiting agent for a coven of witches. So that was the basic inspiration and premise of my story, and I mixed it with the kind of text-based format, and then I was off from there. And then the title Satanic Panic Attack kind of was like, that was like the last thing to come, because I knew it was kind of based on Satanic Panic overall, and it was set in the 80s, and I forget. I had a couple other titles that I was leaning towards, but
I'm glad you went with this one because it does fit the theme. It does cover the Satanic Panic movement a lot. I mean, you have the kid listening to the devil music. You have him dressing up in black, I believe, at one point. He's talking back to his dad. He's telling him to get fucked.
yeah, that's always the first step towards worshiping Satan, is talking back to your dad.
Absolutely.
If your kid is talking back to you, he's a Satanist.
You gotta get an exorcism going.
Exactly.
You told me before we began doing this podcast that you were obsessed with the Satanic Panic movement. You read all the books, watched all the movies. You will directly involved somehow. So go ahead and tell me about that.
I mean that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but like I said, I grew up in a fairly religious household, and so in the 80s especially, like, this thing was ever present, how, like I said, heavy metal music was satanic and it was evil, and movies were satanic and evil, and Lord of the Rings was satanic and evil, and if it was around Harry Potter, it would have been satanic and evil, and He-Man, Masters of the Universe was satanic and evil, Thundercats, like all of it. Like, thankfully, my parents weren't that,
Yeah,
strict about
strict.
that sort of thing, but there were plenty people in church and stuff who, like, oh, we went to see Return of the Jedi, and they were like, oh, that's evil. The Emperor's evil. He shoots lightning from his hands, and I was like, yeah, no shit, he's fucking evil. He's the bad guy he's supposed to be, and he loses in the end. Like,
Yeah, they have
what's
a
the
point.
problem?
They have a point. So not
Yeah.
wrong.
So there was a lot of that growing up, and especially around, music was probably the most heavy metal music. And I remember when I was younger in church one time, they had like a special service where they showed us this film, and it was called Hell's Bells. And it was
Uh-oh.
basically a Christian made documentary about the dangers of rock and heavy metal music and how it was all satanic and evil and it was going to corrupt your children. Again, it had the opposite effect. I watched this documentary in church and it was supposed to scare us and teach us that this was wrong and bad, and it it titillated me, and I was like, oh man, what is this? This stuff is so cool, and it introduced me to all these bands I probably never would have heard of. Like it covers bands like Venom and Merciful Fate, and like your average church kid, your average any kid then, didn't know who Venom was. And here they are giving it to you on a silver platter and like showing you the videos and the knives and the blood and the sex and all this stuff. And like it was fascinating, and we kind of got obsessed with it.
Yeah, like the whole thing with the music was they were afraid it would inspire the youth to begin doing drugs and having sex, right?
Yeah, and I mean, whatever, music has done that since the beginning, since Elvis or whatever. But like, especially with as imagery got a little more intense in the 80s and stuff, it was more than just drugs and sex and alcohol. It was Satanism. And although you look back at a lot of that stuff now, that they were so afraid of like Twisted Sister and stuff and like Poison and Motley Crue, and it's comical that anybody would be afraid of that stuff. It's so silly, you know?
Yeah, like Kiss.
Like yeah, like none of it's serious, but people weren't very informed and they just saw what this stuff looked like and they were freaking out, So
How do you think they would have reacted to a band like Ghost?
yeah, I mean, Ghost is a similar thing. Like if Ghost came out back then, I'm sure plenty people would have been outraged, even though their music is fairly tame by modern standards.
Oh,
But
is it? Oh my god. Okay.
just the religious dress up and whatnot. Like, I mean, to me, Ghost isn't even a metal band. They're just like their sound is more like garage rocky to me. Like when I first saw their getup, I thought they were going to be like some black metal band or something really extreme, you know?
So who would be extreme to you?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. There's plenty bands out there trying to be extreme and like, the whole black metal thing that came out of Norway in the late 90s where bands were like, had severed pig heads on stage and naked people doused in blood on crucifixes and
Nice.
spraying animal blood on the audience and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which to me, none of that sounds appealing. Like I don't want to be in there getting sprayed with animal blood and stuff like that. But so to me, I picture something like that. But that's not your typical.
So okay, so let's say you have to do a reading of Satanic Panic Attack. What type of performance would you do to kind of bring in the Satanic Panic feeling to the audience? Would you be spraying them?
No, I don't think I would be spraying the audience. That's probably not in my best interest. Um, that's a good question, though. I've only done one reading so far, and I did wear, you know, a priest's collar and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of already done. So, I'm not really sure what I could do. I could dress up as like your typical 80s dirtbag metalhead teenager or something, like
How do you usually dress?
I'm just a normal, not very fashion conscious guy, jeans and t-shirts pretty much
Yikes.
all year round.
Oh man.
Yeah,
That's okay.
not very threatening at all.
That's the most threatening outfit anyone could have on because you don't suspect it.
That's true. I mean,
Yeah.
I could be capable of anything.
That's what the Unabomber dressed in. Look at him.
Hmm.
Yeah, look at him.
Yeah, he did wonders. His career's going great.
He's getting some good press. Uh, Now, didn't this whole movement kind of begin with that book that came out in the late 70s, Michelle Remembers?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That was a big thing. Was it? I've never read that. I think yeah. Was it Michelle
Yeah,
or
it was Michelle.
yeah? And it in the end, I think it kind of turned out to be a hoax.
It was definitely a hoax. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I haven't read about it in a while, but I recall listening to some podcasts a few years ago, and the whole thing was she was seeing a therapist, and the therapist began to supposedly like dig up all of these secrets from like when she was a child and being raped and tortured by all these Satanists in the 50s.
Yeah, and like I mean that's the big danger, and that's like the way a lot of these stories start is like the repressed memories being dug up because it's more like susceptible people having memories implanted on them, you know?
Yeah.
There's another really great book I read. It came out in like 1994. It's called Remembering Satan, and it was written by Lawrence Wright, who wrote Going Clear, that book about Scientology
Yeah.
that they made HBO made the documentary on and stuff.
That was a
And
good
it's a
documentary.
yeah, it's a great doc. The book was great, and Remembering Satan's a great book. Although every time I see the title, to me it sounds like a memoir where someone's writing fondly about their time with Satan. It's like
Yes.
remembering Satan. Ah,
Uh,
those were the times.
he always wore jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah. But that's a great book, and it's about, I mean, it was one of the bigger cases where um, I think it was the Midwest or somewhere, this sheriff, his two kids, basically out of nowhere accused him of molesting them. And then so the police were investigating and they were interrogating him and they were saying they're accusing you of this, they're accusing you of this, and there was a point where like the accusations just got crazier and crazier. Like they would be interviewing the kids and they would say like, well, what else did he do? Did he, did was there somehow it turned into like uh, there was rituals and sacrifices, and my father impregnated me so he could, and he killed the baby for Satan and all this stuff, and somehow that was implanted in the kids' heads, like fed to them, and they regurgitated it, and then the cops went to the sheriff and they're like, your kid said you did this, and he's like, well, I don't remember doing it, but if the kid said I did it, I probably did it.
Oh no.
Like pure insanity. Just how I don't know, for whatever reason he goes along with it. He agrees with it. He's so suggestible. The kids are so suggestible, and it just became this whole thing where the whole family was like a mass hysteria. They were like, "Yes, this happened. We were having these rituals, and I gave birth, and then they killed the baby and drank its blood, and like it's an insane story, and it's a really good book."
That's crazy. Jesus
And
Christ.
they actually made a horror movie version of it in 2015. It's called Regression, and it has Ethan Hawke and Emma Watson.
Nice.
And I thought it was going to be really good because it's directed by Alejandro Amenabar, who did The Others,
Hmm.
and Abre los Ojos, which was remade as Vanilla Sky, and The Sea Inside, which was like an Oscar-nominated movie. So I was like, this guy's a good director. This is great subject matter. This could be a cool movie, but it wound up being really shitty. So
Oh,
that was a disappointment.
that's sad. I also recall I should have done an ounce of research before talking to you, but I'm thinking now, wasn't there like a nursing school, like a nursery school, some type of preschool where like all the kids will accusing the teachers of molesting them?
Yeah, that's another big case. I don't remember the specifics of it, but there was.
Yeah, it was like the investigators investigating it were like just suggesting things they
Yep.
could have done to the kids, and the kids were like, "Yeah, I'm a kid. What do I know?"
Yeah. Yeah, and that's usually the way it happens. And it's also something I've noticed a lot recently from watching a lot of true crime documentaries. Anytime, you know, kids are involved or people of lower intelligence, they are basically, fed this information by law enforcement, and then they regurgitate it because they're afraid and they just want the ordeal to be over. So they think that by telling the adults what they want, that's going to end their ordeal, and then it's done.
Yeah.
Like time and time again, all these documentaries, like Making a Murderer, and just like just so many. It's always the kid admits to something, and then later on they're like, no, that's not true, and they're like, well, why did you say it? And they were like, well, because that's what the cops wanted to say, and I was afraid, and they were bullying me. So it's
Yeah.
like it seems like more like law enforcement, they're interested in a confession and closing the crime, whether they get the right person or not, whether they actually solve the crime. It's just as long as someone gets the blame and it's closed, people could stop worrying about it, and that's the end.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you hold a kid in a room long enough, they will tell you anything.
Yeah.
It's fucking bullshit. Now you have a new collection out about dreaming apes. I think.
Yeah, it's called Whispers in the Ear of a Dreaming Ape.
Oh, so just
Uh,
one ape. Okay.
just one ape, and he's doing all the dreaming.
Nice. I like an ape who dreams.
You gotta have dreams, even if you're a lowly ape.
Do you want to tell me a bit about this collection? Any Satanism in this collection? Well, nah.
You know what? I don't think there's any real Satanism per se. There's a lot of religious stuff and a lot of like blurring the lines of, you know, what's the real evil? Is it the evil stuff, or is it religion just another flip side of that? It's definitely thematically something I've been attracted to, I guess, from growing up in a Christian household, like I've said before.
I imagine would affect you, especially fiction.
Yeah, it's kind of inescapable,
Have
you
you
know.
kind of stepped away from all that now?
I'm trying to, because I'll sit down to write a story. 'Cause there's just so many interesting, weird things about religion and Christianity, especially. Like, there's always some weird thing, and because I guess I'm so aware of it and was so inundated with it, there's always some little tidbit where I'm like, this would make a great story, and this would make a great story. But then I'm like, no, you gotta back away from the religion thing. Do something different.
Embrace it, man. Just keep
Yeah.
going.
Well,
Yeah.
it's there, and I want to do get a little variety, but it's in there. So the collection's put out by Clash Books, came out in October. It's got 13 stories in it. Most previously published, one is brand new, and it's all dark, weird fiction. I wouldn't say it's all traditional horror. There's definitely lots of horrific stuff in it. Some straight up horror elements, but a lot of like blending genres. And then I also am a sucker for a story written in some sort of oddball format.
I was offended to find that you neglected to add the story you wrote for the magazine about the game show. What was
No,
that called?
that's in there.
What?
Yeah, man, that's the headliner. It's the last story.
Okay. Well, I don't have it in front of me.
That's what was that one called? Oh, Nobody Rides for Free.
Shit. I looked at that TOC too, and I thought he doesn't have it.
No, that one had to be in there, man.
Wow. Well, I'm no longer offended about that.
Well, I am glad you're not offended. That's
That's
something
a
that was not true.
that's an amazing story.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
told this story to someone else because they were asking about, subject matter and writing weird stuff and what you like, even whether you think it's going to sell or not. And I think it was Eddie Generous on his podcast. He was saying that was his favorite story in the collection, which I found funny because I was like, well, to me, it's probably the most off-putting, and a lot of people aren't going to really like it that much. So he was asking me about when I wrote that story, did I have any place in mind for it, or did I think I'd be able to sell it at all? And I basically told him, I was like, when I finished it, I was like, nobody's going to buy this story about Max and Laurie. So you're the only people I sent it to, and you bought it and printed it.
Now, why did you think that? Is it because we only publish things no one reads? Well,
Yes, and I was like, if I want no one to read this, I know exactly where to go with it.
you made a wise decision, my friend.
No, I mean, I don't know. I just, from what I've experienced, you guys take risks, and I like
Yeah.
that. And I knew if anybody would take a risk on it, you guys would, because it was a longer story, and then in the end, I was had like stage directions and stuff, and it was a weird one.
Yeah. You should keep writing strange things like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I
I
intend
know
to.
you will thinking about stopping, but don't.
Another thing I remember from my young Christian days was this very popular Christian stand-up comic. His name was Mike Warnke.
Okay.
I mean, if you didn't go to church, you probably never heard of him, but he was hugely popular, and he was, from what I remember, quite funny. But part of his shtick, I guess, was that he claimed to be an ex-Satanist high priest that had been involved in human sacrifices and drinking blood, and he had scars all over his body that where they had cut him and all this stuff, and that he, ever since he left the Church of Satan, they were following him around and stalking him. And he even has, like, on one of his live recordings, he's talking about the Church of Satan, and he's like, "Yep, there they are right now. Three men in black hooded robes just came in and sat down in the back row. They're here watching me." And he had a popular autobiography called The Satan Seller, which my parents wouldn't let me read because they thought it was too upsetting. And but that was a big part of his shtick, like talking about how he used to be a Satanist, how bad it was, and all this stuff they did. And then it turned out, like 10, 15 years later, a Christian newspaper or magazine did an undercover story on him, and it turned out he made the whole thing up. He also lied about being like a war hero and in Vietnam, and like getting wounded in Vietnam. He was having multiple affairs and cheating on his wife and like embezzling money. So
I
you
kind
gotta
of like
take
him
that.
now. I like him better now.
Yeah, so you gotta kind of take that into consideration with the whole satanic panic thing, where like there's always someone there to capitalize on something and make money off of it. And
Absolutely.
this guy was like, you know what? People are afraid of Satan. I'm gonna make Satan funny, put him in my comedy, and claim that I used to be a Satanist, and I'm gonna get rich, and then I'm gonna bang a load of women, even though I have disgusting facial hair and a mullet, and I look like Richard Bosley from fucking Happy Days.
Was he telling jokes about Satan, or just like
Bosley.
introducing himself? Like, oh, by the way, I used to be a Satanist, and now I'm telling comedy. So he knows some jokes about God.
I mean, most of his jokes maybe were not Satan centric, but like his preaching stuff, he got into the Satanism stuff, where like how dangerous it was, and how he was positioning himself as this edgy guy because he escaped Satanism, and they could kill him at any moment,
Ah,
but God is going to protect him. And there they are in the audience. Meanwhile, it was probably a bunch of his friends just threw on some robes and came in and sat down.
that's a disappointment because I think a Satanist stand-up comic would be pretty funny.
Oh yeah, that's a great hook right there.
Yeah. Oh well.
Oh
Well,
well,
fuck it.
lesson learned.
Maybe we could try doing something like that down the road.
Yeah, stand-up comedy for Satan.
Okay, I'll begin workshopping some jokes, and I'll get with you.
All right, great. It'll be because like Jewish comedy is big, where you talk about being Jewish and Judaism and growing up Jewish. Like you need a comic who talks about what it was like growing up as a young Satanist and how strict your parents were, and like you can't leave this table till you drink all your blood and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. There's probably some type of joke about playing with a beef tongue. I don't know.
It writes itself.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway,
So before we end this, I do have to bring up one last thing with the whole Satanic Panic movement that we didn't exactly touch base on, and that goes with the music. We were talking about music, but we didn't talk about how there was this like conspiracy that if you listened to music backwards, it would be Satan delivering a message. What was going on with that?
Yeah, that was a big thing. I remember that was probably the first way I was introduced to the whole music is satanic thing, where it was at church or whatever. They were playing us some audio documentary or some audio clips of records being played backwards, and of course it was like it was like the Beatles, like you know, John is dead, Paul is dead, Turn Me On, Dead Man, the whole thing, and it's like, I was. And I even just remember thinking at the time, I'm like, yeah, this is creepy and all, but come on, it's the Beatles. Like the Beatles, they're not satanic, And it was
Yeah.
just even then I thought it was the most preposterous thing. But I don't know, it's like you you played the records backward, and by some chance the sounds would make what sounded like other certain words, and people would immediately be like, it's the devil. They're talking about the devil.
When was the last time you gave that a shot? Like, have you listened to anything backwards recently?
No, no, nothing new.
Okay, well, thankfully I came prepared to my podcast, and I
Nice.
got a new song. It's from
Okay.
2002.
Okay.
It's by a band we both like a lot called Trapt. It was
Oh.
I don't know what we should call it, a rock band, a classic rock band.
They're classic in a sense.
Yeah, classical. This song is probably the most well-known song. It's called Headstrong. It's
Hmm.
really inspirational, I find. It motivates me to get things done. So, I don't know, why don't we just play this backbuilds randomly and see if maybe we get a message from Satan?
Yeah, let's hear it.
All right.
We just listened to the whole thing.
Yeah. Until we get a message. Unless
All
we
right.
don't.
Speaking of Satan, I'm listening.
Come on, Satan. Nothing yet.
I know he's the one. We always get the nose.
Oh
We can all get the nose.
no. Oh.
Whoa. I don't know if it's satanic, but it's scary sounding.
Oh my god, what the hell? What the hell was that? Good God. Oh, shit.
Wait, is that really in there, or are you adding something else in there? Because
Josh,
I
I,
heard some demonic voices in there.
Josh, I don't know what to tell you. That was frightening.
Well, could you decipher anything other than something
Oh,
about noses? I heard something about noses.
I, I mean, something about noses. I mean, the devil's nose? Satan's nose? He's sure to drink Ovaltine. What? Oh my god. That's fucking crazy.
I mean, I hear something. I can't quite decipher it, but it is very demonic sounding, and very other sounding, like it doesn't belong in that song.
I don't think it belongs on this planet,
No.
man. I am I am afraid I no longer want to continue this episode, so I'm gonna end things. But before I do, how can people find you online?
Oh, you could find me hanging around Lit Reactor, doing my thing, litreactor.com.
Oh, I thought it was .net.
No, don't spread lies. Litreactor.com. And I have wisely purchased the domain joshuachaplinsky.com so none of my friends could purchase it and put up weird stuff about me. But mainly, I'm on Twitter at JCCockrobin.
Nice.
And you can get my books You can get Whispers in the Ear of a Dreaming Ape directly through Clash, or you can get it on The Real Satan, Amazon.com.
Oh, shots fired, Bezos.
Oh, yeah. And my previous work, Kanye West Reanimator, is also there.
Yeah.
And, got a bunch of anthologies, a couple of recent anthologies. I'm in the Big Book of Blasphemy from Necro Publishing with like Brian Keene and Gabino Iglesias and Ed Lee, so that's a fun one. And another one anthology called I Transgress, which is oddly enough full of transgressive fiction, and it features people like, I keep forgetting the publisher's name. And
I know.
Oh, do you? What is it?
No, I mean, I know you keep forgetting because I was just listening to the Bazong episode.
And I couldn't remember it then. You know what? Hold on. I'm looking it up right now to correct this. I Transgress Anthology. Edited by Chris Kelso, by the way, who is a good man.
Yes, he is.
And it is... Why does it not say on Goodreads? Come on. More details. Published... Oh, Salo Press. Duh, of course. Salo. That classic of fascist cinema. Anyway, so I'm in that, edited by Chris Kelso. It's got stories by Nick Momadis or Mamatas. Mama Say, Mama Sa, Mamatas. That guy.
Yeah.
Dennis Cooper, which is a big one.
Oh, wow.
Oh, Samuel Delany. Like, that's pretty cool. You know, I never thought I'd be in something next to those people.
That's awesome.
James Joyce is in there, oddly enough. Who knew he was still writing? But hey, I'm sharing a table of contents with James Joyce, everybody.
Wow, that's like having a table of contents with H.P. Lovecraft. What are the odds?
Yeah, that's my second time now sharing TOC with a dead guy.
Nice. Well, I mean, if you read a dead guy's story backworld, you will summon Satan.
That's also true. I have heard that.
Yeah.
So dead people make the best collaborators because they don't have much input.
Yeah, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
No.
Okay, well, without saying anything else, thank you for doing this episode.
All right, then.
All right, have a
Thanks
good one.
for having me.
Hey, you're welcome. If you enjoyed today's episode of Ghoulish with Joshua Chaplinsky, why don't you go buy his new collection? Whispers in the Ear of a Dreaming Ape, I think is what it's called, and, pick up the newest issue of Dark Moon Digest, issue 38, featuring Josh's story, Satanic Panic Attack, and hey, while you're at it, why don't you go sacrifice a goat, drink his blood, summon the devil, fuck a pagan, I don't know, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/PMM Publishing, and rate and review us on iTunes, and live spooky and die spooky.